Hello, friends. Oh, excuse me. I just made 2 videos. I purposefully left off the light in the last one that I made because I wanted to make it a little extra creepy. Yeah. Somebody asked me if I would do something explaining a little bit about myself and how I got into this. And I feel like I've done that, but I think it was specifically about the language of light stuff. And I just had an experience outside. I was like, oh, I do need to do that. And the other thing is the old, gosh, that's too loud. I can never remember what volume to put this on. If it seems too loud to me, it's probably too loud to you. Okay. How did I get to the language of light stuff? It's a good question. Since I was little and I was raised Christian, they always talked about speaking in tongues, and my understanding of that was, let's look at my screen. Speaking in tongues, at least in the biblical sense or in the Judeo-Christian tradition, this may not be true. This is my understanding. Okay, I should say people have been speaking in tongues since they could speak. What speaking in tongues means, at least in the Christian tradition, this is the traditional viewpoint. It was called the gift of tongues. So if you found yourself if you only spoke Greek and you were a Christian and you were in some foreign land and you had the gift of tongues, you could suddenly speak that land's tongue. So it was speaking earth languages, human languages. It was not what Christians do, Pentecostal Christians in particular these days, which is, I feel the Holy Spirit, and they start going crazy. Now, let me just get into how I got into it, and then we can maybe talk about the difference between language of light and what those Christians do these days, and other groups of people do as well. How did I get into this? That's a long and complex story. First came into my perception, my awareness, and my thought processes as glossolalia. Terence McKenna spoke of it all the time, and I had a prolific Terence McKenna reading and listening to phase. And it was just at the forefront of my thinking all the time that if you took the magic mushroom, eventually you might find yourself speaking in tongues. If you took DMT, you might speak in tongues, which just meant speaking in glossolalia, which to him was like elf speak, because when you take DMT, you see these quote-unquote hyperdimensional machine elves being created and destroyed and created and continually created and destroyed and created and destroyed in front of you. And then they start speaking, which to him was like, this weird elf speak, or something like that. And they seemed to really enjoy it. So I always found that was really interesting, that they seemed to really enjoy it, and they seemed to be egging you on to do it yourself. So why would they want you to speak in tongues yourself, or to speak in glossolalia? I had no idea, but that was basically where my thinking on the matter started. Second one that influenced me in this regard was through chaos magic. Chaos magicians are often in many ways lined up or in accordance with theories and ideas and practices of the Discordians. So you read like Robert Anton Wilson and Christopher Hyatt, and they'll recommend doing things, and I think Hyatt is British, and so it might be a little more jarring for somebody who's grown up in the British culture to do this kind of thing, because we don't go to finishing school, at least we don't on the West Coast very often. My friends used to do this kind of thing all the time, where you just start making every sound possible, like me, mom, oh, my, no concept, like just to shake yourself up and get yourself loosened up and out of your body and out of your normal way of being and speaking, which is to say, another aspect of that is going about your day-to-day life, paying very close attention to the way you react to others, so that when somebody says, "Hello, how are you?" you don't just automatically go, "I'm fine, thanks. How are you?" You actually pay attention to what you're going to say, because that's just part of your programming. You actually pay attention to how you feel, and if you choose to respond, "Well, actually, I'm not feeling very well today, but thank you for asking," or whatever, you just pay attention to your programming. And so part of the speaking in glossolalia on purpose, which is a forced form of glossolalia, just to, me, me, my, moo, moo kind of thing, ba, 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 ma, 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 and so on, is to get you out of your comfort zone, because being in your comfort zone means being locked into your programming sometimes. And so I would force myself at certain periods of my life, a lot of times when riding in the car, to try to do that, just to loosen yourself up, just to get the tongue going, to get yourself out of your everyday box. And that was just one of the practices that I did randomly. The other way it came, and there's one more after this, well, there's two more really, actually, was Judy Satori. I have a huge place in my heart for this woman, and I've never met her, and I had the opportunity to go to a conference where she was going to be doing Language of Light activations from Archangel Metatron and the Elohim or whatever, and it was going to be fantastic, and I completely spaced out on the date, and it was the 19th, and it's over. So I totally missed it. It's 3:33. That number is very problematic for me. I could have gone, I should have gone, but it just didn't seem feasible. Yeah, I should have gone. Anyway, she does more like what I do. Usually not working with, darker currents and ego death and things like that, but, like diamond light heart activations and lotus activations and all these different things, which sound much more new agey, and she works specifically with Metatron and the Elohim and I think the goddess Tara and different beautiful light beings, divine beings. And I would listen to her. She was recommended to me by a healer friend of mine and meditation instructor and Diksha giver, Harishyam Sudar, who just said, "She sounds very reputable," and this was a long time ago. "I think you should listen. She's going to be doing a free activation." And so I was like, okay, I'll listen. And it was really weird. It was like this weird dimensional stuff was going on. I know I've described this before, and so if it's out there somewhere and this is like repeated information, let me know, because a lot of people have asked me, "Why don't you, describe how you got into this stuff? You seem like an open, honest person." But I thought I did, but apparently it's not there, or maybe I took it down because it was old. I don't know. Anyway, I listened to the teleconference, and it was this weird trans-dimensional stuff going on, because we were all saying hello at the same time. Nobody had any idea how to mute their phones, and it just didn't work. But it sounded like this clash of the worlds. Everybody was coming together from all over the world at exactly the same time to receive this, blessing, and it was going to be so powerful that it didn't work when they planned it to work. Like, that kind of thing happens a lot, when you really plan for something, but it's not, it's sort of like you have to have a dry run first, and once everybody gets together and they've all experienced, this confusion of energies, then it levels out, and then the real one can take place later. And so that's exactly like what it was. It was really freaky to hear. And then I started listening to it. It happened again. Then she started putting recordings out, and she still has recordings. If you go to her website, The Sound of Light, all one word, and you can download MP3s that are free, activations and blessings. And when I started listening to them, I started having all of these weird things happening to me. Like, it was just all in the ascension process. I would start to feel weird things happening in front of me in my heart chakra. I was like, what is going on? I would have strange levels of awareness open up all of a sudden in my energy field. I would have weird things. I would start to see like dots, like purple dots, and like weird little tadpoles, green dots, white dots. All kinds of stuff started happening that wasn't happening as frequently before. And yeah, so it opened me up tremendously. Then the other way was Dr. Shaw. Dr. S.H.A. Shaw. He wrote a book that the same friend gave me, thank you, called Soul Communication. Soul communication, as defined in the book, is a little different, and it specifically is to get a message from the divine, not necessarily a language of light activation, which I don't consider messages. When they're activation oriented, when they're blessing oriented, they're not messages to me. They are a message of light, if that's the way you want to define it, but they're not like interpretable, translatable things. At least that's not the way it works with me. You might think differently, and that's fine. Soul communication, different mudras, different practices. Basically, you take a mantra and you say it, and you say it faster, and you say it faster and faster and faster, 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 with like no breaks between the syllables, no breath, nothing to interfere with all the sounds running together. And then once all the sounds run together, you end up with this just sort of like this buzz, you know, that is like a sort of unique sound particular to that blended mantra. And that connects you to the being that you're trying to connect with. That being's particular sound, or the being's essence or blessing contained within that mantra. And there are other processes involved with it. It's a great book. It's called Soul Communication, and I definitely recommend picking it up and reading it. Although I will say, in a little bit of criticism, the entire gist of it is contained within the first couple chapters, and the rest of it is just reiterations and using the same techniques for other applications, and that kind of bothered me because I was like, well, you could have made it like half the length. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a great book. And that got me doing that practice, which also, for me, loosened up the language of light stuff, in that I would begin doing these mantras, and then it would turn into language of light. And so I would be like, what's a mantra that he gives? Shan Shan Jo Liu Bai Yao, Shan Shan Jo Liu Bai Yao, Shan Shan Jo Liu Bai Yao, you know, and it would just turn into the like language of light stuff, and I would be like, okay, you know, well, that's just where it's going for me, and so I didn't, you know, try to force the other ones. Then the other one is Kunlun. They'll say when you're at a Kunlun seminar, if you might start to speak in tongues. And when I was there and people started to open up much more than I did the first time we started practicing together, I mean, basically all I would sit there and I would you know, be in the Kunlun posture, and my legs would start to jump. That's basically all I got. My legs were starting to jump, and I was aware of some type of energy coming through me, and I was feeling giddy, and that's all I felt at the Kunlun seminar. But you know, it was totally worth it. And other people around me were starting to go, fuck, I can't, you know, and like weird little sounds and like things would come out of them, and people laughing and stuff like that. And people started to speak in tongues, dramatic air quotes. And then ever since then, when I would practice Kunlun, like certain things would come out. Like sometimes it would just be an intense energy, and you just, you know, you would just make a grunt, or, you know, sometimes it's really, really deep, and then that energy comes through, and it really shakes you up, you know. And then eventually it started to become, this energy would just activate my throat chakras, and it would be, you know, all this weird, crazy stuff. So that's where it really started to be blasted open for me. Then I decided of my own volition, once I started channeling, and that was mostly because of Kunlun as well, because it starts opening up all the nadis, everything is pure. All of a sudden you find yourself at a point where you just think the name of a specific being, and they start to come into your awareness, and you're like, whoa, what's going on? You know, it's like really freaking intense. And I just decided to direct it in a different way. I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to these beings now. Would you mind doing what Judy Satori does, basically. Like, speak a language of light activation through me. And they were so thrilled to do it. And so that's where I find myself today, you know. So when people look and find language of light stuff and I come up, that's been my journey with it. For other questions that you might have, I'm not sure if I can touch on this. I will try. What is the difference between language of light and Pentecostal Christian charismatic? I don't even know if I have to go into that for all of you more new agely inclined people and spiritually inclined people who are on the spiritual fringe. A Pentecostal Christian is probably not going to listen to a language of light activation from Medusa anyway. But in case you somehow come across that and you're watching this video, what is the difference? I will tell you what I think the difference is. There, in a lot of ways, is not a difference. The simplest explanation that you can get for speaking in this kind of tongue, which is not speaking a real earth language that is translatable word for word, it's speaking in tongues in the modern sense, is that the higher mind is speaking to the lower mind. The lower mind is the stuff that moves your vocal cords and your lips and your tongue and your mouth and everything around it, you know, and that is what is involved in the lower mind, you know, all that kind of stuff. Motor skill mind, kinesthetics, and the higher mind is the energy that comes through. There is a higher energy that comes through. These people, they are opening up certain channels. They are, in my opinion, not opening up in the right way, because if you have a belief structure is like this in your brain. It creates a block for certain energies, and it creates a flow for other energies. If you believe that you're a Christian and the Holy Spirit is going to speak through you, and it's the Holy Spirit of Jesus, that is a belief structure. It is a block and it is a lens. Okay? That lens is open to a certain amount of light. Now all of a sudden that belief structure allows you to speak in tongues because you're expecting that you're going to speak in tongues. You believe that you can. And then the light comes through, which is from a completely different source, could just be the source of all creation and light in the universe, which is blessed and sacred and beautiful. But it gets through this lens, this filter, because you've created this belief system in your mind that is extremely limiting, and then certain things are going to happen because of it, because you have expectations and a belief structure. I do not have many belief structures in my head. Okay? Nothing is true, everything is possible. It's one of the creeds that I live by. It's a little difficult to wrap your mind around, but it's very, very pertinent. Especially when it comes to the fringe. And I don't mean the show on Fox. What happens with these Pentecostal Christians a lot of the times is they'll start crying and falling down on the floor because they're such awful sinners and they just know how horrible they are, and this Holy Spirit is moving through them and they're not worthy of the Holy Spirit. It's incredibly, incredibly sick. It's not healthy. You may be purging something in some way, but you're not purging it in the right way. That is my deepest, most humble opinion, but it's also passionate, and I believe very firmly in that fact. That's one of the belief structures that I do have, because I was raised a Christian and I know what it's like to feel worthless. You are not worthless, you are God. As far as the rest of it goes, language of light activations come through the same type of divine source as a meditator, as someone who believes in transcendence, who believes in awakening, and who believes wholly in surrendering to the divine, not forcing it to do anything. If I connect to a being and they just don't want to speak right now, it's not the time for this to happen. And so we'll do it later. If I try to connect to a being and they're really eager to speak, then oh my gosh, I better do it right now because this really needs to come through. This is really good, you know. And all I mean by that is I try to surrender. I try to leave myself completely open so that whatever wants to come through comes through. And I try to leave the little belief structures out of my brain so that what is good can come through, and then I leave it alone. There's a big difference. I think that's enough for now, because this is 20 minutes long, and I apologize for the length, but thank you so much for watching. If you've gotten this far, any other questions about this really, really interesting stuff, do not hesitate to ask.